Cameras flashed as Samuel Hawthorne stepped out of the black sedan and offered his hand to his wife, Vanessa. She emerged in a tailored navy dress suit, exuding confidence and charm. Tonight was another high-profile fundraiser for her political campaign, and together they looked every bit the power couple everyone believed them to be. Vanessa was a rising politician, poised, articulate, and currently running on a platform of integrity and family values. Samuel, a successful attorney, stood proudly by her side, the picture of a supportive husband. They moved up the red carpet into the grand ballroom under the warm glow of chandeliers. Vanessa smiled for the press, her arm looped through Samuel's. He could feel the slight tremor of excitement in her touch. He returned a reassuring squeeze, heart swelling with admiration. In that moment, Samuel was deeply proud of his wife. Over the years, he had championed her ambitions unwaveringly. Late nights, strategizing for debates, mingling with donors, even adjusting his own caseload to accompany her to events. She often joked that he was her secret weapon, an experienced legal mind to double-check her policy ideas and a devoted partner to reinforce her image. As they entered, Troy Eastman, Vanessa's campaign manager, rushed over to greet them. Troy was youthful and charismatic, with a constant air of enthusiasm. "Vanessa, Sam! You made it!" he beamed, placing a quick hand on Vanessa's shoulder. "The mayor is here already, and people are eager to hear your speech." Samuel observed the ease with which Troy and Vanessa fell into step, talking in low, excited tones about the event's turnout. Troy leaned in a bit closer than Samuel felt necessary, but he brushed the thought aside. Troy had been an integral part of Vanessa's campaign, practically her right-hand man. He'd organized rallies, honed her talking points, and proven himself invaluable. Samuel appreciated Troy's dedication. After all, Vanessa's success was a team effort. If Troy was a bit overfamiliar at times, Samuel chalked it up to the intensity of campaign life. They were all in the trenches together. Vanessa excused herself to greet the mayor, leaving Samuel and Troy standing amid the crowd of political donors and officials. Samuel fetched 2 flutes of champagne from a passing waiter and offered one to Troy. "You've done wonders with this event," Samuel said graciously, making small talk. Troy flashed a humble grin. "Couldn't have without Vanessa's star power. She's a force of nature, isn't she?" He lifted his glass in a toast. "To the future Congresswoman." "To Vanessa," Samuel agreed, clinking glasses. He genuinely believed in his wife's talent and goodness. Vanessa was passionate about public service and spoke often of restoring trust in leadership. Samuel found her convictions inspiring. It was one reason he'd fallen in love with her over a decade ago. Across the room, Vanessa laughed brightly at something the mayor said. She was in her element, drawing people in with her magnetism. Samuel felt a familiar warmth watching her, a sense of this is where we're meant to be, together. As if sensing his gaze, Vanessa caught his eye and gave a small, loving smile. In that moment, Samuel felt like the luckiest man alive. The evening unfolded smoothly. Vanessa took the stage for her keynote address, and Samuel stood off to the side, applauding with the crowd. She spoke eloquently about integrity in office and family values, tying policy to personal principle. "I entered public service," Vanessa proclaimed, voice ringing through the hall, "because I believe in honesty, accountability, and strengthening families. Those values guide every decision I make." The audience broke into applause. Samuel's chest swelled with pride at her words. Honesty, accountability, family. She meant them, he believed. He'd seen her live those values at home as a loving wife and devoted mother to their 2 children. As Vanessa continued, Samuel noticed Troy standing at the back corner of the stage, arms folded, eyes fixed on her. He had an odd half-smile on his face, one Samuel couldn't quite place. It wasn't the standard look of professional pride he'd expect from a campaign manager during a successful speech. It looked personal, intimate almost, as if Troy were watching her rather than the candidate. Samuel shook off the strange feeling. Troy was likely just pleased at the speech's impact. When Vanessa concluded with a flourish and the crowd leapt to its feet, Samuel joined the standing ovation. She stepped down into his embrace, face flushed with excitement. "How did I do?" she asked in a whisper, though she clearly knew the answer from the crowd's reaction. "Amazing, as always," Samuel replied, kissing her cheek. He meant it. In public and in private, Vanessa always seemed to shine. As the night went on, they mingled separately, Vanessa working the room of supporters, and Samuel chatting with a few familiar faces. At one point, he found himself near a cluster of journalists covering the event. He overheard one whisper, "She's a media darling, and having that handsome attorney husband doesn't hurt the image either. They're like a storybook couple." Samuel hid a modest smile and moved along. He had never sought the spotlight himself, but if his presence bolstered Vanessa's profile, he was happy to oblige. Later in the evening, Samuel caught sight of Vanessa and Troy in a quiet corner by the cocktail bar. They were standing quite close. Troy was murmuring something, and Vanessa laughed, touching his forearm lightly. The gesture lasted perhaps a second too long. Samuel felt a tiny prick of discomfort. Vanessa's expression. Was it a blush on her cheeks? He couldn't be sure from this distance. Troy leaned in, speaking near her ear over the din of the crowd. Vanessa nodded at him, then playfully swatted his shoulder as if he'd said something cheeky. It was the kind of familiar, tactile interaction Samuel realized he himself hadn't shared with Vanessa much lately in these busy months. He dismissed a flicker of jealousy. They work closely, he reminded himself. Campaigns often forged intense camaraderie. Vanessa and Troy spent countless hours together, strategizing. It wasn't unusual for them to have inside jokes or moments of levity. Samuel trusted his wife completely. Their marriage was founded on mutual respect and honesty. If anything, he was glad she had a supportive team member she could relax around in the tense campaign environment. "Sam, there you are!" A voice jolted him from his thoughts. It was Grace, a longtime family friend and one of Vanessa's campaign volunteers, approaching with a warm hug. "Isn't she incredible tonight?" Grace gushed, nodding toward Vanessa. "Incredible indeed," Samuel agreed with a proud grin. Grace lowered her voice conspiratorially. "The whole room adores her. I dare say Troy adores her most," she chuckled. "He barely leaves her side these days. Talk about dedication." Samuel forced a polite smile, unsure why that comment irked him. "He's doing his job," he replied lightly. "Oh, absolutely. They make a great team," Grace continued, oblivious to Samuel's slight change in tone. "I sometimes wonder if Troy even sleeps. He's always by her at events, late nights at Campaign HQ. Good thing you're such an understanding husband, letting them burn the midnight oil." Samuel's smile tightened. Midnight oil. Indeed, Vanessa had had many late nights lately, but she always assured him it was campaign work, debate prep, donor calls with Troy, policy sessions. He had accepted it as part of the election push. Hearing it phrased like that, though, stirred an uneasy feeling in his stomach. He glanced back to where Vanessa and Troy had been, but they'd separated. Vanessa was now chatting with a small circle of constituents, and Troy was on the other side of the room, checking something on his phone. Samuel tried to shake off the unease. There was nothing truly amiss that he could pinpoint. Just small things, a look, a laugh, a comment. The aid of perfection around his marriage and Vanessa's public image was still intact, gleaming as bright as ever under the ballroom lights. Surely that's all it was. A perfect aid reflecting an equally true reality. Yet as the night wound down and Samuel helped Vanessa gather her things, he couldn't entirely ignore a subtle tightness in his chest. She was buoyant with triumph, thanking Troy profusely for his hard work as they all parted ways. In the car ride home, Vanessa rested her head on Samuel's shoulder, exhausted but happy. He stroked her hair, gazing out the window at the city lights streaking past, and told himself that everything was exactly as it seemed. They were the golden couple. Everything in their world was right. He did not know that on this night, tiny cracks had begun to form beneath that shining surface, cracks that would soon shatter his world apart. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Glass. The morning sun filtered into the Hawthorne household kitchen, casting a gentle glow over the marble countertop. Samuel stood at the stove flipping chocolate chip pancakes, Saturday breakfast tradition with the kids. His 14-year-old daughter, Emily, sat at the island scrolling on her tablet while 10-year-old James doodled on a notepad. Normally, Vanessa would be here too, laughing and sipping coffee in her robe, enjoying rare family time during the busy campaign. But today, as on many recent days, her seat was empty. "She already left?" Emily asked, not looking up from her screen but clearly noticing her mother's absence. Her tone held a note of disappointment, masked by teenage nonchalance. Samuel slid a pancake onto James's plate and sighed. "Yeah, she had an early meeting." It was the explanation he'd been giving a lot lately. Vanessa had indeed hurried out before dawn for a weekend strategy session with Troy and other staff, preparing for an upcoming primary debate. She had kissed Samuel's cheek on the way out, murmuring, "Thank you for understanding," as he groggily assured her he'd handle the kids. He did understand, or tried to. Campaigns were temporary tornadoes of activity. Normal life was suspended until Election Day. Still, as he watched his kids eat in silence, he felt a tug of guilt. They missed their mom. Samuel missed her too. He tried to fill the void with cheer. "Maybe we can swing by the campaign office later and surprise Mom with lunch?" James perked up. "Can we, Dad? We haven't seen her since, Wednesday." The boy's exaggeration stung slightly. Vanessa had been home, but perhaps James noticed how even when she was, her attention often wasn't. Emily finally lifted her eyes from her tablet, skepticism written on her face. "She'll be busy. I don't want to bother her." The hurt in her voice was poorly concealed behind teenage sullenness. "We wouldn't be bothering," Samuel said gently. "I think she'd love a quick visit." He ruffled Emily's hair, but she pulled away, not in the mood. The truth was, Samuel himself wasn't entirely sure a surprise drop-in was wise. He knew how absorbed Vanessa became at Campaign HQ with Troy and the team. Would she welcome the family, or would it stress her out more? He decided against it for now. Instead, he promised the kids they'd all have a special dinner together soon, after the debate maybe. Just a few more weeks, he assured them, and himself. Then, life will go back to normal. Later that day, while the kids played in the yard, Samuel took the opportunity to catch up on some work in his home office. As a senior partner at a reputable law firm, he often brought case files home, but today he found himself distracted. The offhand comment from Grace at the gala kept replaying in his mind. He's always by her, burning the midnight oil. It was true. Vanessa had been working late many nights. At first, those late nights were at home. He remembered her and Troy on conference calls that ran past midnight, Vanessa pacing the living room while Troy's voice buzzed on speakerphone. But more recently, she'd been staying at the campaign office or out at events, and would slip into bed long after Samuel had fallen asleep. Samuel drummed his fingers on the desk, an unsettled feeling growing. Why was he letting these thoughts nag at him? He trusted Vanessa implicitly. They had never given each other reason for jealousy. They'd been married 15 years, and though not without disagreements, they always prioritized honesty. Maybe we just need some time together, he thought. It had been weeks since they had a real date night, or even a meaningful conversation not about the campaign or schedules. The distance between them wasn't emotional, just circumstantial, right? His musings were interrupted by the buzz of Vanessa's phone on his desk. She had forgotten it this morning in her rush, and apparently hadn't noticed yet. Samuel glanced at the screen. A text notification from Troy lit up. Need to discuss polling data. Call me when you can. Harmless enough. Still, something made Samuel pick up the phone. He knew her passcode. It was their anniversary date. And for a moment his thumb hovered over it. A pang of guilt hit him. He'd never invaded her privacy before. There's no need, he told himself firmly, setting the phone back down. Troy's her campaign manager. Of course they text constantly. He stepped away, chiding himself for even considering snooping. This was exactly what stress and distance could do, breed irrational suspicion. Samuel resolved to talk with Vanessa that night. Perhaps he could convince her to carve out Sunday afternoon for a family outing, campaign be damned. They all needed it, especially her. That evening, Vanessa came home around 9 p.m., looking bone-tired. The kids were already in bed. Samuel greeted her with a gentle hug in the foyer, and she melted into his arms with a weary sigh. "Long day?" he asked softly. "The longest," she murmured. "Debate prep was brutal. Troy had me rehearsing answers on camera again and again. I'm just glad to be home." She kissed him, a brief press of lips that felt routine. There was a time when even after a tiring day, she'd linger in his embrace, perhaps find comfort there. Now she pulled away quickly, kicking off her heels and heading toward the kitchen. "I'm starving. Didn't really get to eat." Samuel followed. "I kept a plate warm for you." He retrieved a dish of pasta from the oven. Vanessa smiled gratefully and sat at the table. He joined her, hoping to strike up conversation. As she twirled spaghetti on her fork, he said, "The kids missed you today. We all did." A shadow of guilt crossed her face. "I know. I feel terrible. Once the debate is over, I'll make it up to them, I promise. It's just these few weeks." "I understand," he said, placing a hand over hers. "But maybe tomorrow we could all go to the park or have dinner out. Just a couple hours of family time." Vanessa squeezed his hand weakly. "Tomorrow we're filming that campaign ad most of the day. And then there's a donor dinner." She noticed Samuel's face fall and stopped, setting down her fork. "Sam, I'm so sorry. I hate this. I hate being away. I'm doing this for us, for our future. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it." Her eyes brimmed with tired tears. Samuel's heart softened. He moved to kneel beside her chair. Hey, of course it's worth it. You are going to make a difference. This crazy schedule will end, and we'll have our life back." He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. She leaned into his hand, closing her eyes. At that moment, Samuel felt the distance between them shrink. This was the woman he loved, under immense pressure, needing his support. How could he have entertained any doubts about her devotion? Vanessa managed a small smile. "What would I do without you?" "You'll never have to find out," he replied, kissing her forehead. They went upstairs soon after. Vanessa was too exhausted for anything but sleep. She collapsed into bed, and within minutes her breathing became the slow, steady rhythm of slumber. Samuel, however, lay awake beside her in the darkness, mind churning. In comforting her, he had pushed aside his own anxieties, for now. But faint cracks had formed in the glass of his perfect world, and hairline fissures of doubt still crept along the edges of his thoughts. He told himself once more that it was only the stress. Campaigns tested marriages. Everyone knew that. Trust your wife, he thought, as he finally closed his eyes. Trust her. Yet trust can be a fragile thing. All it takes is one moment, one discovery, to splinter it completely. And Samuel was soon to discover something that would make those subtle cracks widen into a devastating break. Chapter 3. Shattered Reflections. A week later, on an unseasonably cool Tuesday night, Samuel's life changed with a single, cruel revelation. It began innocently enough. He was working late at the firm, preparing briefs for a case. Vanessa was out of town at a campaign event in a neighboring county, scheduled to return home late. Emily and James were at a sleepover with their cousins that night, so the house was unusually silent when Samuel finally returned around 10 p.m. He stepped into the master bedroom, loosening his tie, and noticed Vanessa's travel bag on the floor. She must have swung by home after the event. "Vanessa?" he called out. No answer. Perhaps she had gone back out, to the campaign office or an errand. It struck him as odd she hadn't mentioned coming home first. As he moved to hang up his suit, something on the nightstand caught his eye. Vanessa's phone lit up with notifications. She'd left it behind again. 2 missed texts from Troy and an unread message. Remembering his internal admonishment not to snoop, Samuel started to put the phone aside. But then the screen flickered with a new incoming text, one that made his breath catch. "Can't stop thinking about last night." Read the preview from Troy. Samuel's hand froze inches from the phone. Last night? Heart thudding, he unlocked the phone with the anniversary passcode before his conscience could protest. The message opened in full. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You were amazing, babe. So glad we'll have more time together tomorrow." For a moment, the words swam in front of Samuel's eyes, incomprehensible. Babe. Last night. Amazing. The phone nearly slipped from his trembling hand. He forced himself to scroll up, revealing a chain of messages that sent a sickening jolt through his entire being. Troy, 8:23 a.m. Morning beautiful. Hope you slept okay after... Vanessa, 8:45 a.m. Barely slept. Kept wanting more of you. Troy. Tonight again? I'll make an excuse to keep you late after the town hall. Vanessa. Yes, need you. Each line felt like a dagger. Samuel's knees went weak. He sank onto the edge of the bed as a cold sweat broke over him. His mind rebelled against the obvious truth staring from the screen. Vanessa, his Vanessa, was having an affair. With Troy. The campaign trips, the late nights debating policy, the easy familiarity he'd witnessed, it was all explained in cruel detail by these texts. He scrolled further, finding even more explicit exchanges from prior days. References to meeting in hotel rooms, stolen kisses behind campaign events, even complaints about how hard it was to act normal around him. One message from Vanessa read, "I hate lying to Sam, but I can't stop. I don't want to." That one stung especially deep. Another from Troy sneered about Samuel without naming him. "He's so oblivious, doll. Practically gift-wrapped you to me." Samuel's stomach lurched. He had to clap a hand over his mouth and breathe slowly to fight down the nausea and sudden desire to scream. Humiliation washed over him in waves. They were mocking him. The devoted husband made the fool. It was particularly bitter because of how wholeheartedly he'd supported her career, only to be repaid with deceit of the worst kind. Every late-night dinner he'd kept warm, every time he comforted her stress, every sacrifice, now twisted into a cruel irony. His vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall. With a shaking hand, he navigated the phone to the photo gallery and emails. A flurry of hotel confirmation emails met his eyes, reservations he hadn't known about. Some were under Troy's name, others under aliases. One in particular caught his attention. A receipt from the Carlton Hotel downtown, dated just last night, for a deluxe suite booked with a campaign credit card. Attached was a note from Troy. "Everything booked for our planning retreat." Asterisk. Samuel's jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. They had spent the previous night together after an event, presumably in that hotel suite, on the campaign's dime. The audacity. Not only betrayal of him and their family, but betrayal of donors and supporters, using campaign funds to fund their tryst. If true, that would be a serious ethical violation, perhaps even illegal to convert campaign money to personal use. It dawned on Samuel that this affair wasn't just a personal blow. It could implode Vanessa's public image and career if exposed. The irony was savage. The candidate preaching family values and honesty was lying and cheating behind closed doors. Hypocrisy of the highest order. Hands shaking with adrenaline and hurt, Samuel methodically forwarded the incriminating emails to his own device. He also took photos of the text conversations with his phone. His movements became mechanical, the lawyerly part of his brain kicking in through the emotional haze. Save the evidence. He didn't yet know what he'd do with it, but the attorney in him recognized the power of indisputable proof. If nothing else, he would need it for a divorce, for custody. The thought made him shudder. Divorce. Custody. Their children. A ragged sob escaped him as he thought of Emily and James. This would destroy their family. Did the kids suspect something? Emily's resentful comments about her mom's absence flitted through his mind. God, how do I shield them from this? He wondered in anguish. Studies he'd read came back to him. How infidelity can traumatize children, leaving them feeling betrayed and distrustful. 75% of children feel lingering betrayal toward a cheating parent. Would Emily and James be among them now? The fact that Vanessa had put their children in this position made Samuel's sadness quickly ignite into anger. Just then, he heard the front door open downstairs. Vanessa's voice called, "Sam? Are you home?" She sounded anxious. Perhaps she realized she'd left her phone. Samuel stood, heart thumping. For a split second, he considered confronting her right now, demanding an explanation, unleashing the hurt and fury coursing through him. But as he heard her footsteps on the stairs, something in him steeled. He wouldn't confront her empty-handed or in blind rage. If being an attorney had taught him anything, it was the importance of preparation and evidence. His hand tightened around her phone. He had the smoking gun here, but he needed more, proof that was indisputable and could hold up under scrutiny or lies. If he revealed his knowledge now, she might deny, delete evidence, spin stories. After all her lies thus far, he couldn't trust a word without corroboration. Swallowing hard, Samuel swiftly powered off her phone and slipped it back onto the nightstand as if untouched. He swiped at his eyes, trying to erase any sign of tears, and took a deep breath. Vanessa stepped into the bedroom doorway. In the dim light, she looked surprised to see him. "Oh, you're back," she said, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. There was tension in her face, perhaps worry about the phone or guilt. Samuel wondered how he ever could have missed it. "Got home a little while ago," he replied evenly. His voice sounded alien to his own ears, hoarse but controlled. He willed himself to maintain composure. Vanessa glanced at the phone on the nightstand and visibly relaxed, seeing it there. I forgot my phone when I changed earlier," she explained hurriedly. "I realized after the event and came home to get it." Samuel just nodded, watching her carefully. In the past, he would have stepped forward to welcome her home with a hug or kiss. Now he couldn't bring himself to touch her. He feared that if he got too close, he might recoil, or worse, explode. "How was the event?" he managed, moving past her toward the hallway to put some distance between them. His hands were shoved in his pockets to hide their shaking. Vanessa blinked at the casual question. "It was fine. Good turnout." She paused, studying him as he turned his back to her, ostensibly to tidy a stray jacket on a chair. "Sam, are you okay?" He realized his demeanor might be off. Years of marriage gave her an intuitive sense when something was wrong. Samuel forced a yawn. "Tired, that's all. Long day at work." It wasn't a lie. He was exhausted, emotionally wrecked beneath the thin fey-aid of normalcy. She stepped closer and gently touched his arm. "You seem upset. Is something bothering you?" Her concern would have touched him deeply any other time, but now it rang false. How dare she act concerned, as if she wasn't the one inflicting the pain? A spark of anger flared, but he smothered it with a tight smile. "Just work stress," he lied smoothly. "I'm okay." He finally looked at her fully. Even now, a part of him yearned for her to confess, to give him some reason, any reason that might make sense of this betrayal. But she simply gazed back with those brown eyes he knew so well, looking genuinely worried for him. A masterful performance. Samuel felt a wave of disgust at her deceit and perhaps at himself for playing along in that moment. Vanessa reached up and stroked his cheek. He fought not to flinch. "You should get some rest," she said softly. "We both should." "Yeah," Samuel replied, stepping away under the pretense of retrieving his phone charger. "I'll be right in." As she left for the bathroom to get ready for bed, Samuel braced himself against the dresser, closing his eyes. In that moment, he felt a storm of emotions: heartbreak, rage, humiliation, and worst of all, a hollowness where his trust and love had been. The image of her tender concern just now clashed violently with the lewd, deceitful texts he'd read minutes before. It was as if he were looking at a stranger wearing his wife's face. He opened his eyes and caught sight of their wedding photo on the dresser, the two of them beaming on that sunny day, youthful and hopeful. He had vowed to love and cherish her, and she promised fidelity. They were supposed to be a team, a family. Samuel's reflection in the glass of the photo frame looked gaunt and grim. The glass was cracking, the picture of their life fracturing. He carefully set the frame face down. In bed, he pretended to fall asleep quickly, lying motionless with his back to her. Vanessa slipped under the covers and whispered, "Good night." But he did not reply. In the silence, Samuel's mind churned. What now? Confrontation tonight was out of the question. He couldn't trust himself to remain calm. And he wasn't ready. He needed to understand the full scope of this affair. How long? How many lies? He needed more evidence, not for curiosity's sake alone, but because a cold, righteous resolve was crystallizing within him. He might have been deceived and humiliated in private, but he would not be made a fool of in the end. As an attorney, Samuel knew how to build a case, and now, painfully, he realized he had a case to build. Samuel Hawthorne v. Vanessa Hawthorne, cause of action betrayal. Except the court would not be a quiet legal chamber. No, Vanessa had built her career on the pedestal of public trust. Perhaps the court of public opinion was where this needed to play out. A fierce glint sparked in Samuel's eyes, staring into the dark. Revenge and justice began to intertwine in his mind. If she was going to lie to him, to their children, and to the public who looked up to her, why should she be allowed to quietly sweep it under the rug? He thought of other politicians caught in affairs who had slunk away in disgrace when exposed. One notable case flashed in memory: a presidential hopeful whose extramarital affair with a campaign aide had ended his career overnight. The public had little mercy for hypocrites, especially those who touted morality. Vanessa was heading down that same path. Maybe she thought she could have it all: power, adoration, and secret pleasures, without consequence. Samuel's blood boiled at the thought. She couldn't. He would make sure of it. But he needed to be smart and careful. He gently exhaled, calming himself. There could be no mistakes. He would covertly amass indisputable proof of Vanessa's affair, as well as any other misdeeds. And when the time was right, he would bring the whole rotten facade crashing down. Behind him, he could feel the warmth of her body in the bed, hear the soft rhythm of her breathing as she drifted to sleep, believing her secrets were safe. Samuel stared at the wall, eyes burning, heart broken but hardening by the second. The glass of his world was shattered, and in those sharp, broken pieces, he saw the path ahead with sudden clarity. He would not simply be the victim. He would become the instrument of justice. In the darkness, Samuel silently vowed. Vanessa's betrayal would be exposed to the light of day, and both she and her lover would face the consequences of what they had done, no matter how public, no matter how spectacular the fallout. Chapter 4. Behind Closed Doors. For the next several weeks, Samuel lived a dual existence. On the surface, he maintained the role of the supportive, oblivious husband of a rising political star. He attended campaign events at Vanessa's side, smiled for photos, shook voters' hands, and even delivered a few introductions for her at town halls, just as he'd always done. But beneath that veneer of normalcy, a storm raged within him. Each morning he woke with a crushing sense of betrayal that quickly hardened into determination. He would remind himself of the plan. Gather evidence, stay calm, wait for the right moment. Vanessa's deceit had lit a fire in him that burned hot, but he banked its flames beneath an outward coolness. It was hardest in private. At home, when Vanessa would lean in to kiss him or attempt small talk over dinner, Samuel had to fight the urge to either recoil or lash out. He limited interactions, claiming pressure at work whenever he could. He spent long hours at the office, which conveniently aligned with her long hours on the campaign trail. This way, their paths crossed minimally. When they did have to occupy the same space, he performed well. After all, years in the courtroom had made Samuel a skilled actor in his own right. He could mask emotions behind a professional facade. Now he used that skill to mask loathing behind polite warmth. If Vanessa sensed any change, she likely attributed it to the stresses they'd discussed. She even once commented that, "We're both so tired lately, we need a vacation after the campaign." Samuel only smiled thinly at the irony. Public events were a special torment. At a charity gala 2 weeks after discovering the affair, Samuel stood at Vanessa's side for photographs. She was radiant that night in an ivory dress, and she clung to his arm as cameras flashed. To any observer, they were a glamorous, united couple. Inside, Samuel felt sick. The entire evening, he had to watch Vanessa and Troy exchange subtle glances and professional smiles that he now knew hid far more. Troy, bold as ever, even came up to them during intermission and chatted amiably. Samuel shook the man's hand, forcing a pleasant expression, even as he fantasized about breaking Troy's fingers one by one. He noticed Troy avoided meeting his eyes for more than a second. Coward, Samuel thought. It took every ounce of discipline not to let his hate show through. Later that night, a photographer captured a picture of Samuel standing just behind Vanessa and Troy as they spoke to a group of donors. In the shot, Vanessa is laughing charmingly at something. Troy is gesturing confidently, and Samuel stands by with a neutral smile. That photo made it into a local paper with a caption praising the Hawthorne campaign's strength, noting how even Vanessa's husband, high-profile attorney Samuel Hawthorne, and her campaign manager Troy Eastman work in tandem to champion her cause. A true family affair. The bitter double meaning of family affair wasn't lost on Samuel. He clipped that newspaper image and tucked it away with his growing trove of documentation, a reminder of how the world saw him versus the truth. Behind closed doors, Samuel was methodical. He began by securing a private investigator, a discreet professional he sometimes hired at the firm for difficult cases. He met the PI, Mark Renner, in the back of a quiet coffee shop far from the city center, ensuring no one from the campaign would spot them. Without naming names initially, Samuel described a situation: a spouse suspecting infidelity, needing conclusive proof gathered legally. Mark was an old-school investigator, mid-50s, with a no-nonsense demeanor. He slid a notepad across the table. "Write down the details," Mark said quietly. "Dates, times, places they might meet, description of the other man, vehicles. Whatever you know." Samuel complied, writing. "Likely meeting at hotels. Key person, Troy Eastman, campaign manager. Have texts confirming affair. Need photos of together in romantic sexual context and evidence of overnight stays. Possibly gather hotel records. All must be legally obtained. No illegal surveillance." He underlined that last part. He knew to avoid any tactics that could backfire. Every piece of evidence must be unassailable and obtained within the law, so that if and when he used it, neither Vanessa nor Troy could claim they were victims of illegal privacy invasion. Samuel was aware that, for instance, secretly recording someone in certain states without consent could violate wiretap laws, and distributing sexual images could violate revenge porn statutes if not careful. He had no intention of crossing legal lines. Mark read the notes and raised an eyebrow. "Campaign manager, huh? Messy. You want this for divorce?" Samuel's jaw tightened. I want the truth documented. The use of it, I'll decide later. Mark nodded. Discretion was his business. Understood. I'll need access to any schedules you can get me, when and where they travel, etc. That afternoon, Samuel used his position as Vanessa's husband to quietly gather intel. It wasn't hard. Vanessa kept copies of her campaign itinerary on a shared cloud calendar that Samuel could access. He noted upcoming trips and events where Troy would also be present, ripe opportunities for their liaisons. One stood out: an overnight stay next week in Greenhaven for a rally. Vanessa had already casually mentioned to him, "We'll be heading up with the team, staying the night after the rally." The team. In reality, likely her and Troy in yet another hotel. Samuel shared these details with Mark. They agreed on a plan. Mark would trail the pair discreetly during that trip to capture photo or video evidence of them entering or leaving a hotel room together, ideally in an affectionate moment. Meanwhile, Samuel himself worked other angles. He dug into phone records for their family plan. As the account holder, he could see logs of calls and texts, though not content. The frequency and timing were telling. Unsurprisingly, Troy's number appeared dozens of times at odd hours, including many brief calls very late at night. Samuel printed the logs, highlighting those. He also accessed credit card statements for any charges that seemed off. One of their cards, used mostly for household expenses, showed nothing unusual, but the campaign's financial disclosures, which were public record, revealed a few eyebrow-raising entries. As a lawyer, Samuel knew how to retrieve those reports from the State Election Commission's website. In the latest quarterly filing, he found several hotel charges and travel expenses on dates corresponding to times he suspected Vanessa and Troy were together. For example, there were 2 separate charges to the Carlton Hotel, the same from the email receipt, labeled as Campaign Strategy Retreat. He cross-referenced that date with his personal calendar. Vanessa had told him she was staying with a staffer because it was too late to drive back. That staffer must have been Troy, and Campaign Strategy Retreat was their euphemism for a tryst. Another entry listed a reimbursement to Troy for mileage and travel, City Inn Motel, Greenhaven. The amount was modest, but it indicated a motel stay in Greenhaven, likely when they snuck off after an event there. Each discovery made Samuel's blood simmer. Not only personal betrayal, but potential campaign finance violations as well. He copied these records. Using campaign funds for personal use, such as funding an affair, was strictly prohibited by law, and he knew it. At night, after Vanessa fell asleep, Samuel would retreat to his home office. There, he assembled a secure digital folder and a locked physical file. The evidence, he labeled it in his mind. It contained photographs of text messages. The original incriminating text remained on Vanessa's phone, but he dared not access it again. However, he had backed them up to a secure drive: phone logs, financial records, and his notes. He felt like he was preparing for trial, except the case was his own life. Sometimes he almost couldn't believe it. Just weeks ago, he'd been blissfully unaware, and now he was compiling a dossier like a detective. He was running on adrenaline and anger. There were nights he barely slept, just sat in that office staring at the damning evidence, hands clenched, imagining different scenarios for how to make them pay. Yet outwardly, he played his role so well that others saw nothing amiss. One afternoon at campaign headquarters, where he popped in to drop off homemade cookies Emily insisted they bring for Mom's team, a volunteer gushed at Samuel. "You two are just the sweetest couple. We see how much you support her, Mr. Hawthorne." Samuel smiled benignly, thanking her, even as he noticed across the room Vanessa and Troy standing shoulder to shoulder, poring over a document. He watched the volunteer walk off, blissfully ignorant, and thought, if only you knew. The discrepancy between appearance and reality had never been more stark. Vanessa herself occasionally commented on how distant Samuel seemed. Once, late at night, she had tried to initiate intimacy, curling against him in bed, trailing a hand on his chest. "We've been like strangers lately," she whispered. The sheer gall of her, wanting physical closeness with him after being with Troy, nearly made him snap. Samuel gently removed her hand and pretended to be half asleep. "Sorry, exhausted," he muttered. He heard her sigh and roll away. In the darkness, he stared at the ceiling, anger and hurt twisting in his gut. Did she actually still love him on some level and regret neglecting him? Or was that just another piece of her cover, keeping up normalcy so he wouldn't suspect? Each time she acted affectionate or concerned now, he second-guessed its sincerity. It was an awful way to live, but he reminded himself it was temporary. Hold it together until the plan is ready. The children, thankfully, remained mostly shielded. They were busy with school and activities, and Vanessa ensured to show them attention in overt ways, bringing gifts from events, promising fun after the election. Samuel focused on them as his anchor to sanity, spending time helping with homework, attending James's Little League games and Emily's school play. Those moments almost felt normal until he'd remembered that their family unit was living on borrowed time. He wondered if the kids noticed the subtle changes, how Mom and Dad no longer shared private jokes at dinner, or how he slept in the guest room occasionally claiming to not disturb Mom when coming home late. If they did, neither said anything, and Samuel hoped to spare them knowledge of the truth until absolutely necessary. One evening, about a month into Samuel's secret investigation, he got a call from Mark Renner. Mark's typically gruff voice had a note of excitement. "Got something," he said. "Photos from Greenhaven." Samuel's pulse quickened. He locked his office door and lowered his voice. "Tell me." Followed them after the rally as planned. They left the team at the bar around 11, drove in her car, just the two of them, to a little highway motel, the Greenhaven Lodge. I got clear photos of them kissing in the car before going into room 214. Mark paused. I also have time-stamped shots of them entering the room together and not leaving until morning. Both came out around 6 a.m., same clothes as night before. And, well, this might be hard to see, but one picture I snapped through the curtains shows them, embracing on the bed. Samuel closed his eyes, a mix of triumph and agony washing over him. It was hard to hear, picturing Vanessa in another man's arms. But it was also exactly what he needed. Solid proof of inclination and opportunity to commit adultery, as any divorce lawyer would say. Photos of kissing and an overnight stay would obliterate any "we're just colleagues" excuse. "Email them to me," he finally said, "securely to the address I gave you." "Already did. Encrypted file. Check your inbox. The password is your case number." Mark treated it like any legal evidence, which Samuel appreciated. "What about payment?" "I'll double it if you continue on call for me," Samuel interjected. "There may be one or two more occasions I need documented until I decide to conclude this case." Mark agreed without hesitation. Money bought silence and diligence. That night, Samuel opened the image files on his laptop, hands steady, face expressionless. Photo after photo displayed on the screen. Vanessa and Troy, outside a dingy motel door, her arms around his neck in a passionate kiss. Troy carrying an overnight bag, likely hers, as they slip inside. A grainy telephoto shot through a gap in the curtain of two figures entwined on a bed, undeniably his wife's form straddling Troy. And the morning after captures of them leaving, looking disheveled. Vanessa's hair was messy, her blouse wrinkled. Troy had a smug smile as he put a hand on her lower back, guiding her to the car. Indisputable proof. Samuel's fist clenched so hard his knuckles went white. He had to look away and breathe deeply for a moment. Even prepared as he was, the visceral impact of seeing it in living color, Vanessa's betrayal, was like a fresh stab to the heart. He carefully filed the photos with the rest. The case was nearly airtight now. He had text messages admitting to the affair, photographic evidence of adultery, records of hotel stays and likely misused funds, and phone logs. Any one of those could start a scandal. Together, they would unleash a firestorm. And Samuel intended to ignite it when the time was right. One crucial piece remained, the perfect moment for revelation. Samuel didn't want a quiet confrontation or a simple divorce filing. No, he envisioned something far more dramatic, poetic justice on a public stage. Vanessa had chosen to violate their marriage while using that marriage as a prop for her wholesome image. The punishment, in Samuel's mind, should fit the crime. The hypocrisy had to be laid bare exactly when she stood most proud of her false virtue. He thought back to her campaign schedule. A major rally was looming in a few weeks, the final rally before the primary election, in fact. It would be the largest event of her campaign, with media, donors, and hundreds of supporters gathered to hear her rousing speech on leadership and family values, the irony of which was now almost laughable. She'd be on stage, thriving in applause. What better moment to unmask the truth? The mere fantasy of it made Samuel's heart pound with a dark thrill. To see her face when the images flashed on a screen behind her, to hear the crowds gasp, to watch her pedestal crumble in real time. Yes, that was the moment. However, he tempered his excitement with caution. Pulling off a public reveal would require meticulous planning. He couldn't exactly walk on stage unannounced with a projector. Security and event staff might intervene. He needed access to the presentation equipment or a coordinated interruption. Fortunately, as Vanessa's husband, he had a certain level of trust and freedom at her events. He began devising a plan. Perhaps he could pretend he wanted to arrange a sweet surprise tribute for her at the rally, something the AV crew would help with. That could give him access to the projector and screen under innocent pretenses. Another option was simply to time a commandeering of the microphone and screen without warning. That was riskier, but perhaps doable if he was quick about it. As the rally date approached, Samuel made a point to visit the venue under the guise of helping with preparations. The rally was to be held at a large public park downtown, with a professional stage and a giant jumbo screen behind the podium to display campaign graphics and live video feeds. Perfect. Samuel chatted up the tech crew casually, learning where they'd run the slideshow and how to switch inputs on the screen. He even befriended a young technician by praising how great the setup looked and asking a lot of questions, playing the curious, supportive spouse. In truth, with his sharp mind, it took only a glance to understand exactly how the projector and laptop were connected and how to override it with another input if needed. He prepared a simple plan. He would preload the damning evidence, photos, screenshots of texts, and key excerpts from the financial records, into a PowerPoint file on a tablet he could carry. Then, during the rally, he could connect that tablet to the screen quickly via a wireless display dongle he saw they were using. A bit of tech savvy from college days came in handy. He tested the concept at home and found he could indeed cast his device to a similar screen with the right settings. If he was in proximity of the equipment and no one stopped him, it would work. To ensure he had a clear path, Samuel arranged with one of Vanessa's staffers that he might like to go on stage after her speech to say a few words of thanks to the supporters. This wasn't too unusual. Spouses sometimes did that. The staffer readily agreed, flattered that Samuel was offering to add a personal touch. Vanessa was informed and seemed delighted. One evening, she smiled and said, "I heard you want to speak at the rally? That's so sweet, Sam." She touched his arm affectionately. "You've done so much for me. I think people would love to hear from you. Just nothing too embarrassing, okay?" she teased. Samuel forced a chuckle. "Of course not. Just proud of you, that's all," he lied smoothly, heart thudding at the duplicity. If only she knew what he was really planning to say. But she had no clue. She was fully deceived by his act now. She even seemed more relaxed with him, perhaps thinking his supposed gesture to speak meant he was still firmly in her corner, utterly unaware of her betrayal. It struck Samuel how deception had become a twisted language they both now spoke, though with very different aims. Every step of the plan was falling into place. As he drifted through those days, the anger in Samuel was kept on a tight leash, only showing in the determination of his preparations. Sometimes, though, late at night alone in his study, he would collapse into the chair and let the pain wash over him. He would stare at that wedding photo he'd turned down, or at some loving note Vanessa had written him years ago that he'd kept tucked in a drawer, and his facade would crack just enough for silent tears of heartbreak. In those moments, he questioned himself. How did we get here? Is this really the right path? But inevitably, he would recall the sneers in Troy's texts, the hypocrisy of Vanessa's speeches, the risk she posed to their children's trust and stability. His resolve would harden again. One night, his friend and colleague at the firm, Michael, noticed Samuel working exceptionally late and pulled him aside. Michael was one of the few who knew Samuel well enough to sense something was off. "You okay, man? You've been a ghost lately, and you look like you haven't slept." Samuel considered confiding, but he decided against it. The fewer who knew, the better for now. He mustered a weary smile. "Campaign life. It's taking a toll, that's all. I'll be fine after the election." Michael nodded sympathetically. "I can only imagine. Hang in there. Vanessa's lucky to have you backing her up." A wry thought crossed Samuel's mind. Lucky indeed. Aloud, he merely said, "Thanks, I appreciate it." If only Michael or anyone knew the tempest behind Samuel's tired eyes. But soon, everyone would know the truth. Very soon. Samuel left the office that night and drove home in the darkness, gripping the steering wheel, whispering to himself like a mantra, "Hold it together. Just a little longer." The night of reckoning was drawing closer, and when it came, he would have to execute his plan flawlessly. There would be no second chances with something this explosive. He crawled into bed around midnight. Vanessa was already asleep, a faint smile on her lips as if she dreamed something pleasant. Samuel stared at her face in the low light. So familiar, yet now so utterly unfamiliar. He felt nothing for her in that moment but the cold determination of a man on a mission. He turned away, eyes open in the dark, counting down the days in his head. Justice, his brand of justice, was coming. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. Despite all his careful planning and collected evidence, Samuel found his emotions reaching a boiling point as the rally drew nearer. The weight of carrying on the charade was grinding him down. Each day, pretending brought new slights to swallow. And just days before the planned public reveal, Samuel faced a final straw that tested his resolve to wait even that long. It was a Thursday evening, and Vanessa was scheduled to appear on a televised panel about ethics in government. Samuel sat in their living room with the TV on, partly out of morbid curiosity, and partly to make sure he didn't miss any hypocrisy he might later call out. Emily and James were in their rooms doing homework, and Vanessa was appearing remotely from the campaign office. On screen, Vanessa looked composed and credible as ever. The moderator asked pointedly about negative campaigning and personal integrity. Vanessa responded with a solemn nod. "I believe leaders must lead by example, Patricia. I hold myself to the highest standard of honesty. My husband and children keep me grounded in those values every day. You won't find skeletons in my closet," she said, with a confident smile. Samuel nearly choked on his drink. He sat on the couch, fingers digging into his knees as she spoke. The sheer shamelessness of it made him lightheaded. At that moment, James wandered in for a snack and saw his father's face. "Dad? You okay? You look mad." Samuel blinked, realizing he had been glaring daggers at the TV. He forced a neutral expression. "I'm fine, buddy. Just thinking about what the panelists are saying." He motioned for James to lower his voice while pointing at the TV. James shrugged and tiptoed to the kitchen. Samuel listened as the discussion wrapped up, Vanessa concluding with a phrase that made his blood run cold. "At the end of the day, trust is everything. I'd rather lose an election than lose my family's trust or the public's trust." The moderator smiled. "Well said, Vanessa, and good luck to you next week." The program ended. Samuel turned off the television, his reflection faintly visible in the black screen. His face was flushed, jaw clenched so tight it ached. Lose her family's trust? She already had, whether she knew it or not. How dare she invoke their family as a shield in front of thousands of viewers? It was vile. A surge of anger nearly overwhelmed him. He stood abruptly, needing air, needing to do something. In the kitchen, he found James and Emily picking at grapes. They looked up, surprised by his abrupt entrance. Impulsively, Samuel asked, "Have either of you noticed anything off about Mom lately?" He struggled to keep his tone casual. Emily frowned. Like what? He realized he was being unfair involving them, so he backpedaled. Shaking his head, he put on a smile. Never mind. I guess I'm just missing her. James popped a grape in his mouth and mumbled, "We all are." That simple, innocent comment nearly broke Samuel's heart, and his last restraint. James and Emily, their kids, deserved better. They deserved the truth, as painful as it might be, rather than living in a lie. And seeing how Vanessa exploited their existence for her image on TV infuriated him beyond words. He excused himself and went to his study, locking the door. There, he paced like a caged animal. His mind raced. Why wait for the rally? Why not confront her now tonight? He pictured himself driving to the campaign office, bursting into whatever strategy meeting Troy and Vanessa might be having, and throwing the printed photos onto the table for all to see. Or cornering Troy in the parking lot and beating him bloody. These visions were satisfying in the moment of fury. But Samuel knew they were foolish fantasies. A personal confrontation, a violent outburst. Those could backfire, or at least wouldn't achieve the public accountability he craved. As he paced, Samuel's phone buzzed with a text. Speak of the devil. It was from Troy's number, sent to a group chat including him and Vanessa as a campaign update. Great job on the panel, Vanessa. Trending in a positive way. Strategy meeting tomorrow 7 a.m. will debrief. Troy added a thumbs-up emoji. Samuel stared at the message, a red haze creeping into his vision. The audacity of this man to praise her publicly, to act the loyal campaign manager while privately sleeping with her. If Troy were standing here right now, Samuel wasn't sure he could restrain himself from doing harm. He threw the phone down on his desk. His eyes landed on the locked drawer containing all the evidence. This was going to explode soon. The urge to make it sooner was intense. But he reminded himself sternly, stick to the plan. The rally was mere days away, and it would be far more devastating and irrevocable than any hasty move tonight. He forced himself to take deep breaths, the way he coached witnesses before testimony. Calm, focus, patience. Just then, his desk phone rang, the private line. He answered, and was surprised to hear Grace's voice, the family friend who volunteered on the campaign. Sam, I'm sorry to bother you. It's late, I know, Grace said apologetically. It's fine, Grace, he assured, masking his agitation. What's going on? Grace hesitated then. This is awkward, but are you and Vanessa okay? Samuel's stomach lurched. What do you mean? Well, Grace lowered her voice as if someone might overhear. I was closing up some of the phone bank logs tonight and I saw Vanessa and Troy in her office. Sam, it looked intimate. Maybe I misread, but I'm worried. Despite everything, Samuel's heart skipped. Grace had noticed something. Of course, now the affair seemed obvious to anyone looking, at least to him. But for Grace to raise it meant it truly might be leaking out through their behavior. Vanessa and Troy must have gotten careless, perhaps emboldened by getting away with it, or simply taking a quiet moment, not knowing Grace was around. Samuel had to respond carefully. He still needed secrecy for a few more days. Grace, he said slowly, thank you for telling me, but I'm sure it's nothing. The campaign's stressful and they're close colleagues. You know how people can look closer than they are. The lie tasted bitter. Grace didn't seem fully convinced. If you say so, it just didn't sit right with me. I care about you both and the kids. She trailed off. Hearing the genuine concern in her voice, Samuel softened. I appreciate that. We're we've been under strain, but we'll manage. Please, don't mention this to anyone else. Last thing we need are rumors. Of course, she agreed. I hope you two get some time together after all this. Let me know if you need anything. After hanging up, Samuel sat in silence. Part of him was relieved someone saw what was happening. It validated that he wasn't crazy or overreacting all this time. But he was also alarmed. Rumors starting now could derail his plan. If Vanessa caught wind, she might suspect and try to preempt any exposure. He needed everyone still in the dark a little longer. He considered accelerating to an earlier confrontation, but logistically, the rally was still the prime stage. He decided to call Vanessa, who was still at the office, presumably. The phone rang a few times. He imagined her and Troy scrambling. Maybe she was still with him. Finally, she answered, sounding a bit breathless. Hey, everything okay? Samuel mustered a calm tone. Fine. Saw your panel, you were great. Somehow he said this without choking. Just checking if you'll be home soon. Oh, I've got a few more things here. Don't wait up, it might be late, Vanessa replied quickly. In the background, he could hear a muffled male voice, Troy's likely. He gritted his teeth. All right, don't work too hard. After he hung up, he remained holding the phone to his ear, jaw clenched. That was it. He'd been teetering on the edge, and hearing Troy in the background, knowing they were likely resuming their tryst after that call, pushed him fully into cold, steely resolve. Any last vestige of hope that Vanessa might stop, might confess or show guilt, was gone. She was utterly entrenched in her lies, even daring to nearly get caught by Grace. There would be no mercy. Samuel's plan would go ahead at the rally, and it would be precise and devastating. He would make sure the impact left no room for her to wiggle out or spin the narrative. He spent the next day refining his presentation for the final time. The evidence slides were in order. First, a photo of Vanessa and Troy kissing, an image sure to shock onlookers immediately. Then a sequence of text message screenshots with incriminating lines highlighted. Then financial records showing hotel stays labeled as campaign expenses. And finally, a closing photo of her and Troy emerging from the motel in the morning, a visual hammer blow. He added a simple title to the first slide, The Truth. As he reviewed it, he also jotted down in a notepad some remarks he might say on stage. He would have only a brief window to speak while everyone was stunned. He wanted to choose impactful words. Perhaps something about honesty, like the outline of a statement, had come to him the night he discovered the affair. Calling out her hypocrisy about family values, maybe addressing the audience that they deserve the truth. He scribbled and refined a short paragraph. It was angry but measured, not a rant, more like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. In essence, Vanessa Hawthorne has betrayed her marriage and the public's trust. Here is the proof of her affair with her campaign manager, Troy Eastman, even as she campaigns on family values. I could not allow this deception to continue. He'd end it by saying something about honesty and leadership, and maybe one pointed personal line to let her know exactly how deeply she hurt him. But he'd keep that minimal. This was about exposing her, not his feelings. Finally, he rehearsed the technical execution. He had the wireless casting device, tested with the event's tech system, under guise of testing his own short thank you slideshow, which he claimed he wanted to surprise Vanessa with. The tech crew had even let him plug it in to ensure compatibility, so he was all set. On rally day, he'd carry his tablet on stage, and with one tap, cast the truth slides instead of whatever background they expected. The evening before the rally, Vanessa came home earlier than usual, around dinner time. It was likely due to the next day's importance. She wanted rest and maybe to project an image of family togetherness. The kids were thrilled to have her at dinner for a change. Samuel observed quietly as she laughed at James's jokes and complimented Emily's science project. She was performing mom well tonight, perhaps to assuage her guilt, or just as part of the routine lie. After dinner, as the kids headed to bed, Vanessa approached Samuel in the kitchen. He was cleaning up, and she came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. The gesture startled him. Physical affection from her had become rare except for show. He stiffened reflexively, but she rested her head against his back. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he managed, not turning around. He feared if he looked at her now, his carefully controlled mask might slip at the final hour. "For everything. Your support." Her voice sounded genuine, almost sad. "Tomorrow's a big day. I couldn't have gotten here without you, Sam." He closed his eyes, gripping the edge of the counter. The gall of this woman, to seek emotional solace from the very person she was betraying. Or was this an unconscious farewell, knowing once the election frenzy was over, she might break things to him? He didn't know, and it didn't matter. Samuel patted her hand awkwardly. "I did it because I believe in you," he replied, which was ironically still true in a twisted way. He believed she was a fraud who needed exposing. She released him and moved to his side, studying his face. "You've been so distant lately. After tomorrow, maybe we can talk, reconnect." There was a searching, almost pleading look in her eyes. He finally glanced at her and forced a gentle smile. "Sure. We'll have a lot to talk about." "More than you know," he added silently. He wondered at that moment if some small part of her actually regretted what she had done. The way she bit her lip and looked down seemed almost remorseful. But if that sliver of conscience existed, it was far too little, far too late. They turned in early that night. Samuel barely slept, mind racing through checklists and contingencies. Vanessa fell asleep holding his hand, which nearly made him laugh bitterly in the darkness at the absurdity. He let her hand go once she dozed off, unable to bear the false intimacy. Staring at the ceiling, Samuel felt the enormity of what he was about to do. This would not just be a personal revenge. It would be a public spectacle that likely ended Vanessa's career and scorched their personal lives. Some would say he was cruel. Others would say she deserved it. He had seen that debate play out even in that Reddit story of the man exposing his wife at a dinner. But their situation was even more high profile. Samuel braced for both praise and backlash. He knew once he pulled that trigger, nothing would be the same. He would effectively be burning his life down along with hers. Their marriage, already dead in his eyes, would be ashes. The family would be shattered, though hopefully he could pick up the pieces with the kids afterward. His reputation might take a hit or perhaps a boost depending on public sentiment. He might even risk some legal entanglement. Vanessa might try to claim some wrongdoing on his part in gathering evidence, but he was confident in its legality. Truth was a defense to any defamation claim, and he had the truth in spades. Was he ready? Samuel realized he was. More than ready. He needed this to happen, to release the truth like an arrow from a drawn bow. Only then could he begin to move forward from this nightmare. He finally drifted into a fitful sleep in the early hours, dreaming of standing alone on a dark stage, a spotlight on him as hundreds of faceless people watched in silence. In the dream, he opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He woke with a start, heart pounding, the morning light creeping under the curtains. Rally day. Vanessa was already up, humming to herself as she got ready, seemingly energized. Samuel went through the motions of breakfast and pleasantries. The kids were going to stay with their grandparents during the rally, since it would run late. Vanessa had actually suggested they all come for a family appearance, but Samuel gently argued the kids might not endure the long event happily. In truth, he wanted them far away from the blast zone. Thankfully, Vanessa relented, saying a big rally might overwhelm James anyway. So by midday, the grandparents picked up the kids, who wished Mom good luck, and Dad gave them hugs with extra tightness. "Love you both," he whispered, as if he might not see them for a while. Emily gave him an odd look, sensing his intensity, but smiled and said, "Love you too, Dad." With the children safe, Samuel prepared himself. He dressed sharply in a suit, wanting to look composed and authoritative on stage. In the mirror, he adjusted his tie with steady hands. There was no trace of fear in his eyes now, only resolve and a grim anticipation. He slipped the slim tablet into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and made sure the wireless casting fob was in the other pocket. Vanessa, looking resplendent in her campaign's color, a deep burgundy dress, mistook his resolve for nerves on her behalf. She took his hand as they left to drive to the rally. "Thank you for agreeing to say something tonight. It means a lot," she said softly. Samuel merely nodded and gave a tight smile. He hadn't explicitly told her what he'd say, just a short thanks, supposedly. She didn't press, likely trusting him completely. The irony of her trust in him, when she was the untrustworthy one, was not lost. They arrived at the rally venue as the late afternoon sun cast a golden hue on the huge crowd gathering. People cheered when Vanessa stepped out of the car. She was greeted by staff and immediately swirled into a sea of handshakes and brief conversations. Samuel trailed slightly behind, playing the supportive background figure. He spotted Troy near the stage, clipboard in hand, directing volunteers and looking ever the diligent campaign manager. When Troy saw Samuel, he gave a friendly wave and strode over. "Evening, Sam. Big night, huh?" Troy said, perhaps a tad nervously, hard for Samuel to tell. Did Troy suspect anything? Likely not. Samuel had given them no reason to. "Big night," Samuel echoed evenly. He couldn't help but add, "You've worked hard for this." Troy flashed a grin that Samuel now recognized as entirely insincere. "Team effort. Vanessa's the star. We just set the stage." He checked his watch. "Speaking of, I gotta confirm with the tech guys. You're set to speak right after her speech, right? We have you in the program." "Yes, I'll keep it short," Samuel replied. He felt a twist of dark satisfaction. Troy himself was ensuring the pathway for Samuel's bombshell. "Take your time. Say whatever you like. This crowd loves you to." Troy patted his shoulder. Samuel fought down the revulsion at the touch. Then Troy hurried off. Samuel moved toward the stage area. From the wings, he surveyed the scene. The park was packed with supporters waving signs, local news cameras positioned near the front. The jumbo screen displayed the campaign logo and occasional live feed shots of the crowd. The energy was high. This was the climactic rally meant to carry Vanessa to victory in the primary next week. Not if I can help it, Samuel thought grimly. Vanessa was backstage reviewing her notes, so Samuel stood a few feet away, letting her focus. He took out his tablet, pretending to scroll aimlessly, but actually he was double-checking that the truth presentation was one tap away and the wireless connection was ready. A green light blinked on the fob in his pocket, standby mode. He took a slow breath. A staffer's voice announced, "We're on in 5!" to the stage crew. Vanessa came to Samuel's side, bouncing on her heels with excitement. "Here we go," she said, and leaned up to kiss him. He let her kiss his cheek. "Knock 'em dead," he said softly. The rally's MC took the stage to pump up the crowd, and after a rousing intro, welcomed Vanessa with grand fanfare. She stepped out into the spotlight to a thunderous roar of applause. The evening sky was turning purple, and floodlights lit up the stage. Samuel stayed hidden just off to the side, heart thudding not with pride as it once might have, but with the intensity of impending action. Vanessa launched into her speech, powerful and charismatic. Samuel half listened, anticipating the moment of his cue. He caught snippets that made him smirk darkly. "As your representative, I will serve with integrity. My family's support reminds me why I fight for your families," and so on. The audience ate it up, cheering and clapping. It would all turn in an instant, he knew. He felt like a man holding a secret detonator, thumb hovering over the button. Beside him, a stage manager gestured for Samuel to get ready. He nodded and moved closer, one foot on the steps to the platform. On stage, Vanessa delivered her final lines with passion. "Together, we will build a future based on honesty, trust, and values that strengthen us all." The crowd roared approval. She waved, and the MC returned, saying, "And now, A few words from someone very special. Vanessa's husband, Samuel Hawthorne. Showtime. Samuel strode up onto the stage, forcing a gracious smile as the audience applauded politely, and Vanessa turned to him with a genuine, loving expression, likely expecting a glowing spousal endorsement. He took the microphone from the MC. His free hand slipped into his pocket and pressed the wireless fob's button, connecting his tablet to the screen's input. "Thank you," Samuel began. He cleared his throat. The crowd quieted. All eyes were on him now, and on Vanessa standing just a step behind, smiling warmly at him, unsuspecting. Under the glare of lights, Samuel felt strangely calm. The moment of truth had arrived, and he embraced it. "I hadn't planned to speak tonight at length," he said, which was true enough. "But I do want to say a few words about honesty." At that, he heard Vanessa give a soft, affirmative laugh, as if endeared that he chose that theme. The irony was rich. Samuel's voice strengthened as he continued. "Honesty, as Vanessa said, is indeed everything. Trust is everything. Without it, all the promises and speeches in the world mean nothing." He glanced at Vanessa meaningfully. She gave a slight nod, perhaps thinking he was amplifying her point. "In that spirit," Samuel said, and his tone sharpened, "I think it's time to be completely honest with all of you." There was a ripple of slight confusion in the crowd at his change in tone. Vanessa's smile faltered, just a touch. In that instant, Samuel pulled out his tablet and tapped the first slide. The jumbo screen behind them blinked, and then, with crystal clarity, it displayed the photograph of Vanessa and Troy, locked in a passionate kiss outside the Greenhaven Motel. For a split second, there was silence as people processed what they were seeing. Vanessa, catching the sudden image out of the corner of her eye, turned fully to look, and froze. Her face went pale under the stage lights. A collective gasp arose from the audience. Samuel felt the mic tremble in his hand, but he steadied it. He spoke over the growing murmur, voice cold and clear. "This is Vanessa, last month, with her campaign manager Troy Eastman." He advanced to the next slide, which showed a screenshot of a text from Vanessa's phone. "I love you. Can't wait to be in your arms tonight. V." Blown up for all to see. The crowd erupted in shocked chatter. Some booed, some shouted in disbelief. Cameras flashed wildly. Vanessa snapped out of her shock and rushed toward Samuel, eyes wide with panic. "What are you doing?" she hissed, not into the mic but at him, her voice frantic. She reached for his arm, but he sidestepped, keeping the microphone and tablet out of her grasp. "What I should have done a long time ago," he replied into the microphone, so his words boomed over the speakers for everyone to hear. He clicked to the next slide, an image of a hotel receipt labeled as campaign expenses for a retreat, highlighting the date and her and Troy's names. "This is how your donations were spent," Samuel announced to the crowd, "on secret hotel stays for Vanessa and Troy." The crowd's mood was turning from confusion to anger. A roar of mixed reactions surged. Outrage, gasps, some shouted "liar!" Whether directed at him or her wasn't even clear in the chaos. Front row faces showed shock, some with hands over mouths, others shaking their heads. Reporters were already scrambling, pointing cameras, one trying to live stream the screen content. Vanessa made a desperate grab for the microphone. "Stop! Please!" she pleaded, her voice cracking, audible to the nearest rows even without the mic. She looked out at the audience, eyes brimming with tears and horror. There's been a misunderstanding!" Samuel wrenched away, his own face a mask of vengeance and heartbreak. He moved downstage, away from her, raising his voice forcefully. "No misunderstanding. Only the truth, finally." He advanced to the final slide, the photo of Vanessa and Troy exiting the motel in the morning, looking disheveled. For months, while asking for your trust and votes, Vanessa Hawthorne has been betraying my trust, betraying her family, by carrying on an illicit affair with Troy Eastman. He practically spat Troy's name. In the wings, Troy himself had appeared, looking stricken as his own face showed up on the giant screen next to Vanessa. Some in the audience recognized him and began booing loudly. Security guards started moving toward the stage, uncertain whether to intervene in what was clearly not a physical threat, but a shocking disruption. The event organizers were equally stunned. No one quite knew how to react. It was as if time had slowed on stage. Vanessa's makeup-smooth face now contorted in distress, hands clasped over her mouth as she beheld her own public undoing. Samuel seized the moment to deliver his final remarks, voice resonating with a mix of wrath and sorrow. You deserve to know who you've been supporting. A woman who lies to her husband, to her children, and to all of you while preaching values of trust and honesty. Well, here is honesty. Here is accountability. I won't live a lie, and I believed you wouldn't want to live one either. With that, he dropped the microphone onto the stage floor. A shrill feedback squeal cut through the air briefly. The noise and commotion were overwhelming now, shouts, camera clicks, people rushing about. Vanessa stepped toward him, tears streaming, her composure utterly shattered. Sam, please, she choked out, reaching for him. But Samuel turned on his heel and walked off, refusing to let her even touch him. As he left the spotlight, he heard Vanessa frantically addressing the stunned crowd. I'm so sorry. I can explain. Her voice was drowned in the chaotic din. Troy had vanished backstage, fleeing the scene entirely. Boos and jeers grew louder, mingled with some shouting her name in anger or disappointment. Samuel didn't look back. He strode down the stairs at the side of the stage where security parted, unsure whether to stop him. One guard stammered, Sir, you need to... But Samuel fixed him with such a fierce glare that the guard faltered. In a swift motion, Samuel hopped off the side of the platform and directly into the crowd area. People recoiled and approached at the same time, some with accusatory faces, others with sympathetic or simply shocked expressions. He caught fragments as he pushed through. How could you do that to her, man? And thank you for telling us. And this is insane. Cameras were now turned on him as much as Vanessa. A reporter thrust a microphone at him. Mr. Hawthorne, did you just expose an affair? Do you have comment? He ignored them all, making a beeline for the parking lot. His heart was hammering, adrenaline coursing through every vein. The cool night air hit his face as he broke free of the crowd to the periphery. Behind him, on stage, Vanessa's wails through the speakers abruptly cut off. Someone must have killed the mic feed, or she collapsed, he wasn't sure. He heard the MC trying to regain order to no avail. The rally was effectively over in pandemonium. It was done. Samuel fumbled in his pocket for his car key, breath coming hard. His vision blurred for a second as a wave of emotion hit. Some combination of triumph, rage, and profound sorrow. He steadied himself against his car door. A short distance away, he saw Troy hastily getting into his own vehicle, face pale as a ghost, before screeching out of the lot under a hail of what sounded like someone pounding a fist on his hood. Likely an angry supporter venting fury. Samuel opened his car and got in. His hands on the steering wheel were shaking violently. He forced himself to inhale deeply. He had done it. The image of Vanessa on stage, crumbling under the revelation, burned in his mind. He had administered the punishment he felt she deserved. Public and merciless. He wasn't sure how long he sat there in the car, engine off, as the sounds of chaos drifted from the rally site. Eventually, he became aware of his phone vibrating in his pocket, multiple notifications flooding in, calls, texts, all sorts. He glanced at it. Already there were half a dozen missed calls, 2 from Vanessa, 1 from Grace, 1 from an unknown number, press, and even 1 from his mother-in-law. The world was reacting swiftly. He set the phone aside, unable to face any of it yet. Finally, Samuel started the car. His role here was finished. He left the parking lot as police sirens began arriving, perhaps to manage the crowd or respond to some scuffle. It was utter bedlam behind him. As he drove away into the night, only one thought kept repeating in his head. It's over. In one fell swoop, he had imploded Vanessa's career and annihilated the lie of their marriage in front of everyone. Troy's career was collateral damage, likely irreparable too. They were all ruined in different ways. And Samuel, what was he now? Victor or victim? Liberator or destroyer? Perhaps all of those at once. Chapter 6. Fallout. The immediate aftermath of Samuel's public expose was a whirlwind that none of them could fully control. By the next morning, the scandal was headlining every local news outlet, and even national channels picked up the sensational story of a candidate's husband revealing her affair in dramatic fashion. Clips of the rally, particularly the moment the photos appeared on the jumbo screen and the crowd's collective gasp, circulated online, garnering millions of views. Social media exploded with commentary, hashtags trending about the scandal. Samuel watched some of it from the solitude of a hotel room. He had not gone home after leaving the rally. Instead, he checked into a downtown hotel under his name, knowing the house would be swarmed by reporters soon, if not already, and wanting no part of that frenzy. He needed space to think and to process what he'd done. In the hotel room's silence, he flipped through news channels. One showed a loop of an anchor summarizing. In a stunning turn of events, attorney Samuel Hawthorne interrupted his wife, Vanessa Hawthorne's campaign rally last night to publicly accuse her of infidelity, projecting alleged evidence of an affair with her campaign manager. Vanessa Hawthorne has since suspended her campaign. So she did suspend it, he mused. Not surprising, her position was untenable. In fact, a brief statement had been released by her campaign in the middle of the night. Vanessa apologized for a grave personal mistake, announced she was ending her candidacy to focus on her family, and asked for privacy. It was a swift capitulation. Clearly, there was no fighting the proof he'd presented. Samuel found his eyes drawn to the scrolling text at the bottom of the TV screen. Reactions divided over Hawthorne scandal. Public shaming justified or too far? They were already debating him, not just her. He switched off the TV, feeling a headache forming. He opened his laptop to check some online responses, a masochistic impulse perhaps. Comments and op-eds varied wildly. Some called him a hero for exposing a hypocrite. Good for him, she deserved it. Voters have a right to know the truth. Others condemned him. What he did was cruel and vindictive. He humiliated her like revenge porn. A few noted the legal angle, speculating on if any laws were broken. But as he predicted, since everything shown was true, defamation would be hard to argue, and he had careful to avoid any explicit sexual images that could violate revenge porn laws. No nudity was shown, only suggestive but fully clothed shots. He likely skirted right at the edge of decency, but legally, he felt safe. His firm's internal email even had a memo about it he saw when checking email. They put him on temporary leave to handle personal matters, basically stepping back until media interest died down. He was a bit relieved. He had no capacity to think about work right now. His phone buzzed repeatedly with texts, some from unknown numbers which, when opened, revealed themselves as messages of support from random people who found his number, likely from a public directory or leaked. "I saw what you did. You're a legend, man. Sorry for your pain, but thanks for exposing the truth." Others were more mixed. "As a woman who's been cheated on, I applaud you. But doing it so publicly, wow, hope you and your kids will be okay." There were also hateful ones. "You're an abusive jerk for what you did, airing dirty laundry like that." Samuel tried not to take any too personally. These people didn't know him beyond that viral moment. There were messages from actual acquaintances, too. His closest friend Michael had simply texted, "I'm here if you need anything. No judgment." Grace had left a voicemail in tears, apologizing that she had no idea it was so bad and offering help. He didn't see any message from Vanessa among the initial flood. But Troy sent one, unbelievably. It read, "I'm sorry for everything. Please don't ruin my life further." Samuel sneered at it and deleted the message. Too late, Troy. Troy's life as a political consultant was likely finished. No candidate would want to touch him after this betrayal and fiasco. Word was, the party had publicly condemned both Vanessa and Troy's actions, keen to distance from the embarrassment. The only messages Samuel truly cared about were from his children. He video called his parents' house early that morning, knowing Emily and James were there. Vanessa had not picked them up, obviously. His mother answered with a worried face, and then turned the camera to the kids. They looked confused and upset. They had obviously heard or seen some news. Even if shielded from details, they knew something big was wrong. "Dad, what's happening?" Emily asked, eyes red as if she'd been crying. James hovered next to her, looking scared. Samuel's throat tightened. This was the hardest part. "I'm sorry, guys," he said softly. "Your mom and I, we're going through something very difficult. What you saw in the news, it's true. Your mom made a mistake, and I handled it in a way that's very public. I'm sorry you have to see this." Emily, sharper at 14, said, "Mom cheated on you?" Bluntly, her voice trembling. She must have gleaned that from the coverage or overheard adults whispering. Samuel nodded, tears in his eyes. "Yes, sweetie." Hearing it put so starkly by his daughter cut him deeply. James looked between them, not fully understanding the intricacies, but clearly sensing the family rupture. "I don't know why," Emily continued, anger and hurt in her voice. "How could she do that? And how could you do that at her rally?" She wasn't accusatory so much as stunned. "I wish I had a simple answer," he replied. "I was very hurt, and I wanted the truth out. Maybe I didn't handle it the best, I don't know. But I promise you both, I love you so much. None of this is your fault. We're still a family, it's just going to be different." His voice broke a bit on the last word. James sniffled. "Are you and Mom going to get a divorce now?" The dreaded question hung in the air. Samuel exchanged a glance with his mother, who had tears in her eyes witnessing this. I think so, buddy," Samuel answered gently. "I'm so sorry." James started to cry. Emily put an arm around him, tears rolling down her own cheeks, though she tried to stay strong. "We're here at Grandma's," she said, voice thick. "But can you come? I don't want to see those reporters outside our house and—" "I'll come soon, I promise. Maybe tomorrow, okay? It's a bit hectic right now." He desperately wanted to hug them, but also didn't want to drag them through the media swarm that likely staked out the family home. After a long, emotional call, reassuring them and letting them vent their feelings, mostly confusion and sadness, they hung up. Samuel felt physically ill after. This was the collateral damage he had most dreaded. Exposing Vanessa meant exposing the whole family to public scrutiny and pain. The kids were unintended victims in this war between him and Vanessa. He knew critics were already saying, "Why not handle this privately for the sake of the children?" Maybe they were right. He rubbed his face, suddenly unsure of himself. In achieving his revenge, had he harmed his children more than he protected them? They would carry this very public implosion of their family with them, potentially for life. Kids at school might gossip. They'd see their mother being trashed online, their father labeled vengeful. Was this justice or just cruelty, he wondered, echoing the very question pundits debated. By evening, Samuel ventured back out, donning sunglasses and a cap to avoid easy recognition. He went to a quiet cafe where he sat with a coffee he barely sipped, staring out the window. A couple at a nearby table were chatting about that politician's rally circus. One said, "I can't believe he did that on stage. That poor woman, even if she cheated to be humiliated like that, I'd die." The other countered, "She got what she deserved. Cheaters get no pity from me." He exposed her hypocrisy. Good for him. They hadn't recognized Samuel sitting just feet away, but he felt every word acutely. He left the cafe and wandered somewhat aimlessly. He passed a newsstand and winced seeing the local paper's front page. A huge photo of Vanessa on stage at the moment of revelation, a hand covering her face on the jumbo screen behind her, with Samuel in the foreground of the stage, mic in hand. The headline: Public Spectacle. Candidate's Affair Exposed by Husband at Rally. It was surreal to be a headline himself. His phone vibrated with an incoming call, Vanessa. He had ignored her earlier calls, but now he felt it was time. He stepped into a secluded alley and answered quietly. There was silence on the line at first, except ragged breathing. Then her voice. Sam. She sounded shattered. He said nothing, waiting. You destroyed me, she finally whispered, voice breaking. Samuel closed his eyes. Hearing her pain wrenched something inside him. Part of him had wanted her to hurt, like he hurt, yes. But another part, the one that had loved her for years, felt a pang of sorrow and pity. You destroyed us, he replied evenly, though not without sadness. She began to sob. I know I did, and I can't ever undo it. But to do it that way? In front of everyone? She wasn't yelling, just weeping. Our kids saw some of that, Sam. Do you realize what you've done to them? To me? His temper flared slightly. What I've done to them? Vanessa, you were the one who... He stopped himself. An endless blame loop wouldn't help. He sighed deeply. They will heal. I will make sure they're okay. But you're right. They're hurting now. And I'll have to live with that guilt. I didn't see another way. She sniffled, trying to catch her breath. There were other ways. Private ways. Divorce me quietly. Scream at me in our house. Anything but this. Samuel leaned against the cool brick wall. Maybe I wanted more than just to leave. Maybe I wanted you to face consequences beyond losing me. You risked everything with Troy. Your career, our family's stability. Did you think those consequences would never come? She just cried softly on the other end. He felt drained, anger gone, replaced by a heavy emptiness. I loved you, he found himself saying. Truly. And you broke me, Ness. Using her nickname inadvertently, which made his voice crack. When I found out, something in me died. I'm not saying what I did was right or noble. Maybe it was just cruel. But it's done. She whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Over and over through tears. It was probably the most sincere thing she'd said to him in a long time, but it was far too late. I hope one day you regret it for the right reasons, not just because you got caught, Samuel said quietly. For what it's worth, I do hope you find some peace and become a better person from this. But I can't be there with you. There was a long pause. She then asked haltingly, Will you meet me? Not to fight. Just to talk. Please. He considered. Perhaps closure in person might help both of them. But not yet. Not now. We both need time. I'll be in touch about the divorce through a lawyer. Her breath hitched at the word divorce, the finality of it. Okay, she managed. You'll take care of the kids, won't you? Of course. They'll stay with me. You should probably stay away from cameras and rest. Your folks can support you. They're so mad at me, Vanessa said bitterly. They saw it all. I can't even face anyone. Samuel had no comfort to offer there. Instead, after another silence, he simply said, Goodbye, Vanessa. She broke into fresh sobs, and he hung up gently. The sun had set by now, dusk settling. Samuel realized he hadn't eaten all day, but he had no appetite. He walked back to the hotel, head low. That night in the hotel, he opened his laptop to an email from Mark Renner, the PI. Mark wrote to check in, half-jokingly noting he'd never expected the evidence to be used so dramatically, but expressing hope Samuel was okay and reminding him of their confidentiality. Samuel replied with a thanks and payment confirmation, and that was that. Alone in the room, he nursed a glass of whiskey from the minibar. He sifted through sympathetic messages from strangers that kept coming in. Oddly, he found some comfort in a few where fellow betrayed spouses said he was brave, that they felt vicarious justice through him. Others, however, haunted him, especially one from a woman who said, "I went through this as the child of a very public divorce scandal. It messed me up for years. I hope your kids get therapy." Therapy? Yes, probably wise. He made a mental note to find a counselor for the kids, and maybe himself. At nearly midnight, Samuel realized he couldn't stay holed up much longer. He needed to go home, eventually, face whatever remained. Vanessa wouldn't be there. She had retreated to her parents' house, according to Grace, who updated him via text. The reporters might linger for a while, but he could handle them or avoid them. The house belonged to him and the kids now effectively, and it was time to pick up the pieces. He packed his bag and checked out. The drive home was surreal. The quiet, tree-lined streets of his neighborhood were just as they always were, belying how upside down his life had become in 24 hours. As expected, a couple of news vans idled near the entrance of his driveway. When his car pulled up, 2 reporters rushed over, microphones ready. He rolled down the window only a crack. "Mr. Hawthorne, do you have any statement today?" one asked. "No comment. Please respect my family's privacy," he said tersely, echoing Vanessa's official line but meaning it. They tried more questions. "Do you regret your actions?" "How are your children handling this?" He didn't answer and instead gave them a hard stare. One camera flash went off, but he proceeded up the drive. They didn't trespass further, thankfully. The house was dark and empty inside, exactly how his heart felt. He stepped in and locked the door behind him. There, in the foyer, hung a framed portrait of the 4 of them from 2 years ago. Vanessa, Samuel, Emily, and James, all smiling on a beach vacation. A happy family. Samuel swallowed a lump in his throat and gently unhooked the frame, face downing it on a side table. He couldn't look at it right now. Weary, he went to the living room and sank into the couch. His gaze drifted to the corner where an upright piano stood. On its top was their wedding photo he had turned down previously. He walked over and picked it up. The young couple in the picture beamed with joy, eyes full of hope. Samuel hardly recognized them now. What naive kids they were, he thought sadly. He sat back down, the wedding photo in one hand and his half-empty whiskey glass in the other. Was the cold satisfaction of revenge filling the void? He searched his feelings. There was a grim vindication. Yes, Vanessa and Troy faced consequences. He had not let betrayal fester in secret. But the void of her absence and broken trust that still gaped, hollow and dark. The public spectacle was over, but the private pain remained. He realized that in wrecking her, he had not healed himself. That would be a longer journey. Justice, if one called it that, had been served, but at great cost. Samuel downed the rest of the whiskey. Through the window, he could see dawn was a couple hours off. He had a sudden urge to leave the house, to not be there when morning came, at least not yet. Maybe it was the knowledge that every room held memories, or that reporters would resume hounding by daylight, or maybe he just needed motion, escape. He grabbed a duffel, threw in some clothes, his important documents, and his laptop. He would go pick up the kids from his parents and take them somewhere quiet for a few days, perhaps a cabin upstate they'd once rented for Christmas. He'd explain as much as he could gently and be there for them. They would heal together somehow. Before leaving, Samuel took one last look around the home that once had been filled with love and promise. He set the wedding photo down on the coffee table, staring at it one more time. "I'm sorry," he whispered, to his past self, to his children, perhaps even to Vanessa somewhere in that thought. Then he turned and walked out, shutting the door on the emptiness behind him. As he drove off into what remained of the night, he wasn't sure where the road ahead would lead. There was uncertainty, guilt, and a heavy loneliness riding with him. The cold satisfaction of revenge had been real, but it was already fading, leaving the void still unfilled. Only time would tell if exposing the truth truly set him free, or if it simply left him with new chains of regret. For now, Samuel only knew that he was free of the lies, and that was something. The rest, mending his heart, rebuilding trust for the future, guiding his children through the aftermath, would come one day at a time. And as the first light of dawn finally broke on the horizon, Samuel Hawthorne kept driving forward into the uncertain morning of his new life.